Well, hello, everyone. I would like to start the webinar now. I'd like to begin by asking everyone to make sure that you are on mute so that your sound is not interrupting our webinar today. Well, welcome to today's presentation on the topic of urban augmented reality. I'm Christine Perret, and I'm going to deliver today's session to you. I'd like to begin by thanking the IEEE for hosting today's webinar. The presentation today's is the third in a series of webinars about augmented reality. You can learn about those past webinars and the future episodes by visiting the IEEE Standards Association AR in Your Future webpage. Just search for AR in Your Future and you'll see the past and future events listed. This session concentrates on how and why people use augmented reality in urban settings, or cities, sometimes we call them. I'll review some terminology about augmented reality. I'll share with you some key concepts on this topic and feature a few of my favorite urban AR projects. My presentation will take approximately 50 minutes, and we'll have some time at the end for discussion. If you want to ask a question, please use the chat feature in WebEx and type your question directly to the host, David. We'll get to as many of your questions at the end as we have time for. So I'll go ahead and get started now. So urban augmented reality, just what is it? Well, first of all, I'd like to introduce myself a little bit. I am an independent consultant, and I do strategic planning, and I help my clients to better understand where they're going and what they can do with the technologies available today. I also help them to choose their partners and business suppliers and help to better understand their customer needs. I focus on augmented reality, and I do have an extra focus on the urban environment, as you can see from this picture. Today I'll be talking about what is augmented reality and urban AR and why it's rising and becoming more and more important. I'll be speaking about the requirements and how different people can contribute to urban augmented reality, what it takes to be successful in these kinds of projects, and then I'll be presenting you my favorite urban AR projects. Okay. Well, you know, augmented reality is sometimes a fuzzy concept, and I like to give it my own definition and explain to you in a couple of minutes where it comes from and why we call it augmented reality. I think it really begins with the user experience. We have to think of the user in the middle, in the center, and in the diamonds or the triangles across the top of this picture is how I represent the different inputs, the different sensors that we can use to determine the user's context. So the context is made up of what is around them visually, what their position or their location on the planet sometimes. But in the future, we can also imagine that augmented reality may involve other sensors and senses, human senses. In addition, you have to have content, digital content, and a device on which to present that content in context. To connect the content and the devices and all of these contextual sensors, we use infrastructure. Network communications, databases, special algorithms to process or to interpret the context. And together, when these are all combined, the user's perception of reality is altered with this digital information that's overlaid or synchronized in the physical world. Okay, so what does that look like? Well, in a general way, it looks something like this. I'm here in the shores of Lake Geneva, and we have a mobile device with lots of sensors. And those sensors are able to pick up what's around me. That information, those readings, get sent into the cloud, analyzed, and they get analyzed, and then they are some information gets returned or sent back to the mobile device. That then can be displayed over the real world. So there are text, it could be images or graphics, and that information then appears like it's integrated. So it might include information about the physical world, so those mountain cities or the lake in front of us, or it could also be some graphics that's added on top of this castle in the lower right-hand corner, and this is a kind of a game image that is introduced to enhance the person's experience of the castle. But it could also be a timetable. For example, the camera has detected this boat on the lake and checked the timetable and provided back some information about its destination and its time of arrival. I know that you're having a little trouble hearing me speak, so I wanted to double check. And is my audio okay, David? Could you please let me know that? Okay, very good. Then I'll continue. Augmented reality is, of course, used in many different ways, and we like to segment it sometimes by who the end user is. Remember, I had the end user at the middle, the center of my figure. So we can generally categorize the end users as either being the public or consumers or professional users that have some kind of a business application. And each of the categories of users have different tolerances for different performance metrics, and they also have different abilities or willingness to pay. We can also segment augmented reality according to the delivery platform that the end user uses. So the end user may be in a very highly controlled environment and have some projectors that are sending these graphics down into the physical world, might be on a wall or on a post or somewhere else. That's called projection augmented reality. Then we might also have the, oops, we had a problem there. Okay. The next kind of augmented reality delivery platform you could have is the desktop or a kiosk AR, and that's where the physical world is captured by the camera and then displayed on the screen of the kiosk. The third and perhaps the most popular and certainly rapidly growing delivery platform is mobile, because mobile augmented reality allows us to go out into the physical world and to experience a much greater variety of targets. When you're in the mobile augmented reality platform, when you're using that smartphone or a tablet, you have two different ways that you can acquire the user's context. One is to take the built-in GPS and the compass and have the orientation and position of the user with respect to certain targets. So we call that geospatial-based augmented reality. Sometimes we can also use the camera and we can detect the features or the patterns of the physical world from the live video signal. And that's called computer vision-based augmented reality. Both are applicable for urban augmented reality, and both use other built-in sensors such as the gyroscope and the accelerometer, and perhaps other sensors like the microphones and so forth. So now let's turn our attention more to urban augmented reality. So what is an urban environment? Well, it can be a suburban, it can be a low-density environment or a high-density environment. It could be a commercial environment or an office building that's pictured here. In these environments, these venues have data associated with them. They have digital information about who owns the property, about the size or the position of these different venues. In fact, all venues have some digital information, and some of them have a lot of digital information associated with them. And more, as sensors are being built into the physical environment in these venues, such as perhaps sensors into the parking garage, so we know which spaces are occupied, which are empty, and so forth, then that can provide much more information, not only for the customer who's driving in, but the managers of that facility or that venue. We also have a lot of information that's produced at the time of the design of the venue. So there's information about how the architecture could be used, to build in the management of the venue, to the safety of the venue, and all these different parameters generate enormous amounts of data, and the more and more we associate the data with the venue, we can call these smart venues, and a collection of smart venues we could think of as a smart city or smart urban environment. And I think where augmented reality comes in is that it's really about not just, it's about using that information. It's about combining the physical world and that real world venue with the digital information to bring new benefits. And the benefit is, how can you see what's invisible? How can you see that digital information if you're looking at the target? Maybe you need to know more about the exits in this venue. Perhaps you want to know about the number of people who are in the stands, or a particular player on the field. An athlete in this sports stadium has information stored in the cloud, and yet it's not visible to the people who are in the stands. So with augmented reality, we can actually begin to see the information that's invisible, overlaying the athlete, or perhaps the exit, or the restrooms, or you could have perhaps the products that are sold in a concession stand be visible using augmented reality. So there's lots and lots of different ways that we can use to combine the digital information with the physical world. But let's step back a little bit and talk about the drivers for urban augmented reality. One of the questions is, why is this becoming important or popular? Well, first of all, let's think from the right-hand side. There's a lot of information that the general public may want to have. For example, who owns something, or where can I find the best deal if I'm making some shopping decisions, or perhaps I want to learn more about that environment. I'm a tourist, or I'm thinking of living or moving to this particular urban environment. Then I'd like to have some historical information, or maybe some information about the school system where I'm planning to move my family or planning to go to work. There's different ways that the public or a manager might be able to get some information or to learn about their environment. Then there are some professional uses. For example, if the urban planners are thinking of how to change something in the transportation system, or change perhaps how they've distributed their security forces, they can do an analysis of the data and then overlay that data onto the physical world so that they can make better decisions or help the public to participate in the process of making decisions. So, for example, I know some cities that are using augmented reality in order to help them get the inputs or the participation of the citizens before making a decision. Then we can think of some uses where people want to see if a particular venue, an urban venue, a building, or an underground infrastructure, some transportation system, or perhaps wastewater or something else, they want to know if the plans that were submitted match the reality as built. And so you can imagine how overlaying the digital plan onto the physical world can evaluate whether a piece of physical world infrastructure is in compliance or is safe. You can also think of how perhaps if there is an evacuation plan for the public to, or perhaps the occupants of a building, and we'd like to have an evacuation plan for those people to keep them safe in case of an emergency, we might be able to use that to overlay on the building's corridors and staircases and elevators when people have that kind of a need. So I think there are many drivers that make life more enjoyable, richer, safer, and allow us to participate in the decisions made by our urban planners and managers. Well, let's go into this a little bit more deeply and think about what are the components, what's required for urban augmented reality. So in this picture, I've tried to put all the components together so you can see them in a chain. However, in the next few slides, I'll be going into these in more detail. So starting over on the left-hand side, of course, we need to have the physical world, because without it, you don't have augmented reality. And I don't mean that to imply that urban augmented reality is only for dense environments. It could also be for residential environments or for parks and things that are within the city. We can just loosely think of the physical world both from the outdoor environment as well as thinking of the indoor environment. In fact, we spend almost 80% of our time are living indoors, under a roof or something like that. We must have digital assets. We have to have the actual analysis, the augmentations, we call them, available in a format or a syntax that is readable by the augmented reality system. In order to combine those digital data with the features of the physical world, though, we can use an authoring platform. And oftentimes, there is a component of analytics that decides what to show first or most visible close to you and what might be farther away. And so there's an analytical component to what's going on the server. Finally, there is the visualization, and in this little icon I'm showing how you can have a future building shown using the smartphone, where that future building will be once it's constructed, once it's approved and constructed. And in the lower part of this figure, I talk about having people who are skilled at combining these different components into a complete service or a set of experiences that are available to the professional or to the citizen and the tourist of a city. So these are skills that are quite valuable and important to have. All right, so now let's dig in a little deeper. What is in that physical world? Well, there's, of course, the user. The user is the component in the center of augmented reality, you'll recall, and they are in a venue. So AR experiences are only triggered when a user's AR-enabled system, in this case a tablet, a ruggedized tablet that has a camera on it, and it's in a construction environment, and there's a marker on the floor, as you can see. It's a big square, black-edged square, and that is the features that are being detected. Those features are in the physical world, and this person who's using the tablet with some augmented reality software installed on it is using the building information management system to pull out the model of the future staircase that will be positioned there. So by using the augmented reality software and combining that with the digital data that's in the BIM system, you can superimpose that and make sure, as the staircase is being built, that it's complying with the designer's goals and the designer's specifications. So back to that, the data component, the second important component of urban augmented reality, it's oftentimes we use geospatial data, but there's so much geospatial data out there that you need to go to the sources of it and to request it, or to use some type of a portal or some type of a querying mechanism to discover the data in its catalogs and where it's distributed. Frequently, you're going to be talking with or discussing this with the GIS department, either of your city or your state or your country, and perhaps even the GIS department of an important venue. You will have a GIS group or department within, for example, the shopping center management company. And there they know how to access information that is of a legal nature, of a management or operational nature, as well as that of the architecture, construction, and engineering field. So the geospatial information is extremely important. That's one type of data. You can also find that kind of data and complementary information from your planning department, perhaps from the cultural heritage or your tourism office, or even the meteorological service of your city, regional government, or national government. And I'll give you some examples about that. because you might want to know and you might want to be able to see what the air quality conditions are, or perhaps the temperature or the precipitation or the pressure in your environment. And that kind of data isn't just loosely or randomly available. It is very, very focalized or compartmentalized into these domain-specific portals. Another source of important data for the Urban Augmented Reality project is the construction and the engineering resources. Those are professional people who have either created models using their 3D tools, 3D authoring tools, or they may be using another tool, and then they store those into, once the building is constructed or the venue already exists, into an information management system, just like you might have a learning management system, or you might have a record or a e-commerce management system. In the built environment, we have these building information management systems and models. So that gives you an idea of the sources of the data. We have to also be looking at the segmentation. There's so much information out there, so we have to be able to kind of speak about them in categories. We try to use metadata to help us to categorize it. Most of it has a longitude and latitude, so we can say that they are geospatially referenced, but a lot of them also have a timestamp associated. And you might want to know, is that data absolute, and is it static and not temporally attached, or is that information sort of real time? Is it something that's changing from 1 second or 1 minute or millisecond to the next? That, for example, might be the vibrations in my physical environment, in my urban environment, perhaps due to a transportation system or to an earthquake. We might be having readings of the temporal environment that might be changing, such as whether the parking spots are all filled to capacity or if some of them are emptying out. So that's what I mean by the temporal metadata. We also have information about that digital data that reflects the use of the venue. Is it private or individual uses, such as a private home or the private garden or some individual use? Is it of a business nature that might be managed in a different manner than a public space, for example, a park or the town hall is a public space. So the use of the venue is another way that we can filter information. We might also want to know, is that source of data public, open, private? How to manage the access to that information will determine who can use it in an augmented reality experience. We also need to know, is that data set relevant for the indoor environment, or is it something that's outdoors? And it's very important because we are going to use different positioning technologies depending on whether you're indoor or outdoor. In the outdoor environment, you can use GPS quite easily, and we've gotten accustomed to that. And there are some other ways that we can position the user when they're indoor. So real-time observations can be generated by sensors, and I wanted to mention here that that's why augmented reality is often closely linked to Internet of Things, or the Internet of Everything, and smart cities. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a sort of real-time example. This is a project that's currently going on that I helped to organize, focusing on the city of Geneva. We call it the 3D Geospatial Geneva Showcase. And what we did is we grouped together a lot of digital data that's owned and developed and maintained by the city of Geneva. You can see here that there's some environment, that sort of the digital terrain model is the physical forms, the hills and the depressions in the physical environment. There's also legal information, such as who owns this parcel. That's called the cadastre or the parcel data. There's models that are 3D models of the physical above ground work, and then there can even be some very some buildings have very been surveyed or scanned using very precise technologies, and so we can sort of categorize those differently and look at and use them differently than very coarse-grained information. We have statues, bridges and tunnels, and photography, and even things about the system of distributing water, electricity, and heating under the surface of the city. So you can see the variety of different data that are available. There's also a wide variety of tools that you can use when you're authoring an urban AR experience. Of course, you can use the same tools that are used for other kinds of augmented reality development. Very popular software development kit is provided by the company Metaio, and they have a range of tools, some of which, including the Metaio Engineer, is very precise. It's designed for a very high quality and very say high precision, low latency applications. There are some tools also that are very useful for urban augmented reality, such as the VTT DigiSpace authoring platform. I don't think that's commercially available. However, it was designed specifically for use by people who are making urban AR projects in pilot and proof of concept environments. There's another company called InGlobe Technologies that provides plugins for many of the popular 3D design tools. So these tools that I've listed here on this screen are the ones that we will frequently find being used by architects, engineers that are doing work in the built environment. You might also want to look at this website, this Codesi.net by Rana Aboud. She did a huge research over the last 12 months. This is very current information. She maintains a blog post about urban augmented reality projects and technologies. So I encourage you to go and check that out. You can also download her report conducted. It summarizes all of the research that she conducted over the second half of 2013. So very fresh and insightful report that I encourage you to consult and get more information about mobile augmented reality in the urban environment. So what can we say about the requirements for success? Well, just like any project, you have to have good management, you need to have a timeline, you need to have the basic components I spoke of before. But I want to point out some of the special considerations that you would want to keep in mind to be successful in urban augmented reality. I'm going to talk about these three different areas: the structured data, the requirements, and the interaction design. So I spoke about some of the general concepts before. Now let's think about them more specifically. Some of the people who have done urban augmented reality projects have noticed that the data sets they have been able to obtain are not very accurate, or there are some errors in the metadata. And so this is going to be one of the requirements for success, is you need to make sure that the data is valid and current. You need to also be thinking about sources of data that come in multiple formats, so that depending on the client application, they can choose the format that's most appropriate to the use case. You also frequently need to compress and simplify the 3D models that are available. Usually the 3D models have been well designed for use on a workstation or on a very high-end graphics computing environment. And so you need to customize or improve and optimize those for your mobile environment. You need to think about the resources and the access to the internet or to the cloud architecture so that you can maintain a very rapid access to the digital data, but then also be thinking about the protection of that data, that you have the ability to protect the privacy of the end user as well as the owner of the data and their assets. need to consider how you can change the temporal axis or move through time, especially if you're thinking about cultural history and the use of old images, photographs, or any kind of landmark information, or move into the future if you're working on a planning project. You might want to think about how to automate the process of bringing information into the AR experience platform. So automate the authoring process to reduce the time and cost of bringing that information in. You need to have a good understanding of what the existing workflow is, because it's no point in bringing augmented reality and if it makes things more complicated or more difficult for the user. We need to think about where is visualization the most valuable and how can you integrate that into the workflow. One of the ways of finding that out is by performing interviews and surveys with people who already do this task. You can survey them and request information before and after the introduction of augmented reality. You can hone in on the areas where they most feel they get value. You need to, as I said before, make sure that you know how much information you need to access in the cloud and what kinds of sensors can you access from your built environment. Should have plans to address those areas where you don't have GPS, and that could include when you're indoors, or sometimes even in urban environments you have a hard time getting good visibility to the satellites. And so these are called the urban canyon environments. It's a very dense urban environment, have tall buildings that prevent your user who's down on the ground level from seeing and receiving the signals from the satellites. From the interaction design flow, I already spoke a bit about simplifying the tasks that are presented to the user. You don't want to clutter up the user interface. Sometimes the user knows that there's some information nearby, but they're oriented in the wrong direction. So you need to present some directional arrows to help them get oriented to see the assets that are close by. Should never have too many steps away from the physical world in augmented reality. You need to be able to get close to, get back to the physical reality if you're consulting some digital information. And then I mentioned previously that in your process of designing your application, you need to be thinking about how to lighten these 3D models so that they don't slow down to making it the performance suboptimum. People get very frustrated very quickly. Unfortunately, we're all used to having just-in-time services. We definitely have put a high premium on responsiveness and speed. So let's be thinking now, let's dig into what does this mean. I talked to you about the higher level concepts. We spoke about the requirements for success, and I made you some recommendations, or I offered some recommendations for how to make better urban augmented reality. Now let's look at some real use cases. I'm going to be talking about 3 of my favorite ones in a little bit more detail, and then I'll speak about a few of them at a higher level and just to give you some examples. There are hundreds of examples and projects that I could talk about, but unfortunately we don't have time for that. I encourage you to do some more searching after if you're interested in this topic. You'll find a lot of information on the internet. So one of the first example I'll talk about is a very early example of urban augmented reality. In fact, very mature. It was early in its development and very mature today. It's called Urban Augmented Reality Underground. It's designed so the target audience are the citizens and professionals and government agencies in Holland. This is a Dutch project that was started as a collaboration between the Netherlands Architecture Institute and the Dutch government and some architectural firms. Their goal was to work together to make information about the underground available to other people. So the underground transportation networks and parking facilities, as well as historical archaeological information in the cities of Rotterdam, Amsterdam, and The Hague. But this has expanded and blossomed, and so it's a really exciting project. As a result of their collaborations and the campaigns that they conducted, they have built up a very rich set of data and content about their built environment. It includes 3D models. So those are relatively advanced and complex environments, but there's a lot of photographs and short video clips, and even a narrator that is a popular Dutch journalist. And so people recognize that person's voice. There's an association and kind of an authority that's associated with this person and the platform, the project. This is a very, I think, important component to have a guide who's accompanying the user. So there's not only a diversity of content and types of content, but also of projects. So they go from the very large and complex projects, such as the Amphora Amstel. This is an urban expansion project that is happening below Amsterdam's canal, so you can imagine how sophisticated the engineering should be on that. And then there's also the huge variety of small buildings that have been entered by individual architectural firms. I mentioned before that this was a project that began quite a few years ago, just at the very, very beginning of mobile augmented reality on a smartphone. There was the concept was born there with the Netherlands Architectural Institute. They had these assets, these resources. They began to prototype and to develop their first editions. They didn't have the underground features in the first releases, but as they got more and more information and more confidence built up and more input from the resources and the agencies and the partners and architects themselves, they were able to then create the underground version and launch that. They did launch it, and then they invited many people to submit more information, but unfortunately, during 2013, the Netherlands Architecture Institute merged with some nonprofit organizations, and they've deprioritized this. So now, unfortunately, this wonderful project doesn't have much of a future. Of course, the platform will still exist, and it'll be possible for people to upload information into it, but it's quite unclear how it's going to evolve, and I think that's a very sad state of affairs. Now let's talk about a second project that has been conducted in Finland. This is the DigiSpaces project. It's, again, a collaboration between research organizations, commercial companies, such as Nokia and Skanska, and these other companies you see here. So what they wanted to do is to focus on what kinds of services would people need when they're operating or maintaining a building. They wanted to be able to do a lot of the work indoors and to use computer vision to determine the user's position and orientation, and to bring together the building information management system with this real-world environment. So what does it look like at a conceptual level? This was a figure that was created quite at the beginning when they were proposing the project. So they were thinking of all the different ways that augmented reality might help to bring together the information into the view. So that, imagine that someone is doing a maintenance and they need to replace a part. They want to know when was that part first introduced into the building, or maybe what designer was used, when was it maintained last, how much equipment or cost might be involved. So a lot of different things in the built environment that can really be able to be seen using augmented reality. So when they got further along, they created an entire tool silo called the DigiSpace tools. There's a DigiSpace Studio, which allows you to work with the data that is captured about the built environment, and then you can select the information that you want to keep that you would like to integrate into the AR experiences. And then you use their DigiSpace authoring system to register the model with the real world, and then you can use maps or floor plans to position these models, or the 3D models, more precisely into the built environment. Then finally, you can use their DigiSpace browsers. That's the application that runs on the tablet or smartphone, or in the very near future, people will be using wearable computer, the eyewear, to be able to see the augmented reality information with their hands free. And this is very, very important because people who are working in the built environment need both their hands to hold their tools, to manipulate the doors or whatever tool panels, instrument panels they might have. So this project started back in 2011. They thought about how they would use the 3D models. They had some experience already in mobile augmented reality, but they needed to get better acquainted with the challenges of building management. And so they started to interview people and getting these user requirements clarified. They could then hone in on exactly which use cases were the highest priority and most likely to have a return on investment. Then in 2013, they implemented one room completely, a high level, and then they've been conducting some user testing, and now they are in the process of expanding this in the building in question, so that, and then they also are improving the tools, the tool chain, to make it easier for the developer, and even removing the development steps in some cases by automation. In their case, they're using a robot to go around and scan the rooms and to generate a point cloud. Another of the projects that I really enjoy is this City View AR. This is one of a whole class of urban augmented reality use applications that allow you to see the present, or the now, with the history, the then. And this one was conducted or developed for citizens, tourists, and planners in the city of Christchurch, New Zealand, right after the earthquake. And what they discovered when they were tearing down the buildings, that people had a lot of nostalgia for their old city, and they had photographs and 3D models. So they thought to themselves, how can we combine these historical archives with the present and the future, or the now, as it were? So they also involved citizens very, very tightly in this whole process, and they permitted people to kind of blog or to tell their own accounts, to narrate their stories. And this gave the whole application a different perspective. It wasn't so clean and abstract. It was very much from the citizen's perspective. They also did something quite good with the use mode. So when they position the smartphone in a horizontal position, it's a map view, as you can see on the left-hand side. And then when you lift it in the vertical, the augmented reality pops up on the screen for you. And you can tell it how far or how near you'd like to see. There's an overlay of the models as they are planned for the future, and showing photographs of the past. So the earthquake happened in 2010, and there was this concept that was developed, and then the materials, the digital data, was collected. The participation not only of the city council, but also of the different organizations that were involved, and people, citizens had photographs, and others were collected and gathered. And in 2013, we're not sure how many people actually used it. It'd be very important to know what the feedback has been, and to maintain this in the future as there are new buildings that are introduced, and to develop this chronologically, I think, and that would be very interesting, valuable. Let's go back and recap on some of those success factors I spoke about before and see how they fit into these three projects. Well, in one case, the urban augmented reality underground, you have a public mandate. There was some funding at the beginning, but unfortunately, due to the lack of a return on investment and this high diversity, it's unclear exactly how they're going to proceed. The DigiSpaces system is focused on really these systems to use the building information management system and the models to operate the venues or the built environment. It's very practical, user-focused surveys and studies. In the City View AR, you know, it was prompted by an earthquake. And so one of the things that they learned is that even when you use augmented reality, if the sensors are not very, very robust and there's not a stabilization sensor and algorithm in your mobile platform, you may find that the graphics are bouncing, and that gives people a very unsettling feeling because they feel like their buildings are going to crumble all over again. But one of the things that they did very, very well is to involve the citizens and solicit their experiences and stories. In all these cases, there's an element of 3D and 2D. There's an element of 3D recognition or the 3D assets, and there's this temporal access to look at the present and the future by comparison to the past. Now I'll quickly go through, in summary, a few other examples, and we can go to your questions very quickly. If you haven't already posted any questions, please don't hesitate to address those to the host. So augmented reality can be very useful to bring to life a brochure. Sometimes people print up a plan and they want to use that as a sales tool, and by using a tablet combined with the printed brochure, they can highlight the features. In the lower right-hand corner, you can even see that you can take the model and manipulate it and take it apart or expand it so that you can look deeper and deeper into the guts of the building or the operations even, maybe how the energy is managed, how it's conserved, the green components of a building. This might be a big selling feature. There's also augmented reality that's used to help listings, help the agent make people aware of the real estate listings. On the left-hand side is an application that is used for commercial properties, and you can see how a future building, you can highlight the floor and get information about what's planned, and on the right-hand picture, the HomeSpan application can help you find your residential or private listings. It's fast, it stays highly up to date, and the agents can do it themselves. There's also many, many guides for urban environments or a venue. One of the examples is a Mobile Asia Expo application that was developed for a trade show, an exhibition, and then you can walk around and have you can get points by hitting so many targets. You can also help using a search mechanism to find the booth in a very, very large trade show. There are many great examples of urban augmented reality outdoors. Sometimes they're developed by museums, or think of the one that's been successful in Los Angeles and New York and some other cities in Europe and Asia are the heavy projects, and those are what we call urban murals, augmented reality murals, where the real world, the physical world, can be artistically enhanced using this digital artwork. Well, I unfortunately don't have enough time to tell you about the many, many other urban AR projects that you could learn about. I hope you'll be able to consult the links in this presentation and explore those yourself. So there are some here. Some of the German cities have, these are both from Germany, examples of German cities and projects. So you can see that before the Berlin Wall came down, people couldn't see the monuments on the other side. So you can now have the Berlin Wall reappear and bring us back into touch with history. In fact, historical photographs are also the theme of this application in the lower left-hand side of Jeff Port. I think Port Jeff. I think that's also the use of augmented reality to overlay photographs of the past, of history. This is a Romanian application, so you can think of back in the Soviet era, how that looked before modern times. Let me just wrap up by telling you reminding you of the things that we've spoken about today. There are many, many use cases for urban augmented reality. And I think that you've got to be open-minded, but also look at the way people use digital information in the current urban environment and adapt those. What are some of the drivers of urban AR? Well, you can provide information just of an instructional or informational nature. You can also do analysis and forecasting and help people participate in a decision-making process, especially where the information is very, very complicated for people to see. You want to be able to simplify it for them so that they can make safe, good decisions. So we also want to be able to think about compliance and safety. Augmented reality can be helpful in those environments. There's dozens of great examples, lots of experiences to go on. So I hope you'll be able to get your components together very soon and build your experiences along these lines. Well, that's all for my prepared presentations right now. I think what I'd like to do is to move over to the questions that have come up, and my host, David, will be reading those back to me, and we'll be talking about that more in a moment. So, David, are there any questions?
There are, Christine. We had a lot of questions come through. We have about 7 minutes left. So without further ado, let's get right into it. First question that came through asks, I'm looking for a job in the urban augmented reality space. What kind of skills do I need to develop, and how do I go about starting a career in this area?
Well, that's a very, very important point you raised there, or the question the audience member raises, because there's a terrific shortage of people who know how to do this. So if you're thinking of getting involved in having a career in urban augmented reality, I think it will be very bright. Now, how would you go about preparing yourself? I think it's safe to say you could start by studying some of the very widely available geospatial information management systems. So start to maybe take some courseware, read some books, go to the portals that are studying and informing people. There are publications, magazines as well, many, many events about geospatial information. Urban augmented reality relies heavily on that type of data. Secondly, you must be aware of and developing skills in 3D, because the urban environment, just like all of reality, it has 3 dimensions, and we need to know how to align that physical world with the point clouds in the 3D model. So you need to get build up your skills. So you might want to be thinking of that, and I do encourage you to get acquainted and familiar with the authoring tools that are available. So, David, if you want to just pass on to the next questions, please do go ahead. I think that we can take a couple more.
Sure. We'll go right down the line here, Christine. From a business perspective, what are some of the sources of revenue for companies that may be interested in getting into urban augmented reality?
Okay. Well, that's a very, very big topic. It is actually the business models around augmented reality are the subject of our next webinar in June. So I do want to invite everyone to tune in. I think it's on June 19th, if I'm not mistaken, on the business models for augmented reality. But in this case, let's focus right down on urban AR. There's going to be business models for selling applications. So a visitor might want to buy an application, an urban AR visitor's guide, prior to going to a city. They might also want to have the ability to download an application for a better shopping, making better choices about where they go and take their business. So those are some of the commercial ways you can, very traditional business models for any mobile application. Then also there might be ways for people to sell data about their whereabouts. So there are people who actually want to make their private information available on a commercial basis. Now, that's not quite a business model that we're ready for today, but you can anticipate that will happen in the future. I think that there should also be consideration given to how to protect users. So people may want to, there may be businesses that want to sell a privacy or an encryption service so that the user's private data remains private all the time. But I think the best is to go into more depth on that in our webinar on June 19th. Is there another question, David?
There are a ton, Christine. We have a lot of questions being asked here. The next one is, can AR be used in conjunction with 3D printing at all? Do you know of any cases where AR can be used in conjunction with that up-and-coming technology?
Right, right. Very, very important. And I think that there are many places where 3D printing, where you can print out a particular object and then lay lay the digital world over that object. In the urban environment, I can't think of too many places where you have urban printers. So I think that while it's very important to have 3D printing in creating one-off examples of things, we might be able, for example, to print a little model of a statue that used to be in that public place, and then using the statue, using the 3D model or the miniature version of it, be able to superimpose on the physical world the full-size statue as it looked, with the realistic lighting and shadows and things like that. So I think that there are probably many examples, but perhaps for professional applications, they're better to think more about that. What's another question, David? Before we
so this one comes from
about one more.
Yeah, we have, if we can take the next two questions, the first is, from a standards perspective, are there any standard protocols with interacting with environmental sensors? For example, sensors broadcasting information via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth technology. Are there any standard protocols for that, Christine?
Right. Well, I think standards are extremely important if you want to give access in a way that is future-proof. You need to be able to plan for how to prepare and format your data. So absolutely, there are several standards organizations, including the IEEE Standards Association, that provide suggestions and best practices and protocols for the interacting with sensors. The other organization that has a lot of standards in this domain is the Open Geospatial Consortium. So some of the standards include the city graphic markup language, geographic markup language, I'm sorry. There's also the indoor GML or geographic markup language. There's also, for communicating with sensors, which is the person's question, there's something called the Sensor Web Enablement Suite of standards that describe how to interact with the sensor and query it to determine its capabilities and the observations that it produces. I suspect that there are also domain-specific standards, for example, around engineering specifications and sensors, perhaps around the Earth observation standards, vibrations, and water movement through an urban environment might also have standards that have been developed for entirely other reasons, but are very valuable in the case of accessing that data for augmented reality experiences.
Christine, we have one more question. It's a really good one. I hope you can tackle it in a couple minutes. The question is my private information included in city data sets that could be used for urban augmented reality experiences? Who would want to use that data and how?
Right. Thank you, David. Yeah, I just briefly mentioned that a couple of times, and I think it's coming up now because it's such a very, very important strategic question. And we haven't really put in place the best practices. We don't know quite enough about this to begin to develop the public policy and the philosophies I think this is an extremely important subject that perhaps we could bring up during the next week's Google Plus Hangout on the subject of AR in the city. Now, what kinds of personal data? As you're moving through an urban environment, your position, your location may be picked up, as we have already been made aware by many location-sensitive services, and it's no different for mobile augmented reality. Those who may want to know that information include, for example, the businesses that want to promote a particular product or service to the customer following their profiles. They may be willing to even pay for that information, or may be able to trade it, barter, for a discount on a product or a menu item or something like that. There are also conditions in which the information is available or it's exposed, but it's anonymized. So the identity of the individual user has been removed in the design of the applications and the data management workflow. So I think that we're really going to be seeing a lot of that, where the information is pooled, but it's anonymous, so that we're protecting the privacy of the user and the identity of those individuals who are in the urban environment. I hope that answers your questions, David, and I look forward to having discussions with people if they'd like to follow up with me by email. I can put that up on the screen now. So that concludes today's webinar. I want to thank everybody for their time and participation today. I hope you found it interesting and valuable. I also want to invite you to sign up and to come to the upcoming event, the Google Plus Hangout that I mentioned. It'll be on Thursday, May 15th at 11:15 a.m. Eastern Time. The IEEE is hosting that again. It'll be a panel discussion, and I'll be hosting that. There'll be experts who will be joining me to discuss their projects and the technologies that they use for urban augmented reality. For more information on viewing that session, please visit the IEEE Standards Association Google Plus page. And finally, thank you to the IEEE for giving me the opportunity to bring you today's webinar. Have a great day, everyone.